All right, let's make sense of what took place then. Bring in Peter Mathews. He's a professor of American government, international relations and campaigns with Cypress College in California and joins us now live. Prof, great to see you once again. Thanks very much indeed for making time for us, especially because it's 7 minutes past 1 o'clock in the morning where you're at. So we appreciate your staying up to help us understand, at least from your vantage point, what took place. And perhaps a good place to start is the optics. How much attention do you reckon this debate actually got, given everything else taking place, not only in America, but certainly around the world?
Well, that's true. It's been a tremendously busy time around the world with the news, but this debate was big as well. It's the only debate between the vice presidential candidates for this whole election campaign. And it may be the two debates. The presidential one was only one debate. It's unusual because most of the time you have several debates with the presidential candidates, maybe one or two with the vice presidential. So because of meager number of debates, this became extra important. One more thing. The vice presidential candidates are reflections of the judgment of the presidential candidates. In other words, the presidential candidates got to nominate them, so the public can say, what's the character and ability of these people that were nominated by the presidential candidate? Was it a high-level, high-quality one or not? In this case, Vance had a big deficit to overcome because he's been getting tremendously negative press for the kind of really wild things he's been saying all this time about certain things and claiming that immigrants were eating dogs and cats, some really outlandish claims and other things. So it really had a lot to do to climb up the ladder. And he did very well tonight, very smoothly presented quite a few falsehoods. And I do believe that vice president of the candidate, vice presidential candidate, was really himself to a certain extent, but he also was at the end very strong when he talked about January 6th and whether or not he asked Vance, would you accept the election, the fact that that President Trump lost in 2020? And Vance could not answer that question. That was strong for him at the end. But it was quite a remarkable first half.
Yeah.
Especially.
And, you know, we find that typically after these debates, there's always that one clip that goes viral, right? So when it was Trump and Kamala Harris, we found that the comment around eating of the dogs and pets by Haitian nationals in some parts of the country is what actually ended up catching fire. Do you think there's any of those moments that came from this debate that might actually lead to that kind of reaction?
Well, yes, because when not talking about Vance, but Vance came out and said that he never said that he was for a national abortion ban. And so immediately after the debate, played a clip saying, I support a national abortion ban. That can show a contradiction that can be utilized in a commercial or advertisement that the other side, the Harris side, will put on TV. And that could become viral right there. There's contradictions. And the fact that he would not admit that the election was lost by Trump in 2020. And that calls into question whether they will actually recognize this election. So those kinds of things could become viral once the social media gets a hold of it. But it's still early since the debate was just a few hours ago. Let's wait till tomorrow and see what gets picked up by the media and becomes viral.
Yeah. Gun policy, as expected, also featuring in this particular debate. I wonder if you reckon there were any kind of crystallized views that were advanced by either side.
Yes, of course. There was one on the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, which Vance, once again, he lied about that. He said that President Trump rescued Obamacare, but in actuality, Trump was going to abolish Obamacare on day one, and he even conducted a vote, got the Congress to vote on it, to whether to dismantle it or not. And remember, Senator McCain put a famous thumbs down and said, I'm voting to keep Obamacare. But that was showing that President Trump actually was trying to dismantle Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act. But this Vance came up and said that he saved it. So that's policy, but it's policy that was not very accurately portrayed by Vance. And I think that if you would like to look at Walz and how he tried to handle that, toward the end of the debate, the second half of the debate, he actually challenged Vance to be more truthful about what he was saying and accused him of not telling the truth. So there are policies like that. There's policy about the economic policies, immigration policies came up. And economics, for one thing, is one side is very different than the other. Kamala Harris on her side wants to build up the economy from the ground up by investing, by taxing the wealthiest and the big corporations a certain amount of money to bring money in for infrastructure investment, modern technology, green technologies, creating more jobs. On the other hand, President Trump's side wants to go ahead and cut taxes on wealthy investors. Hopefully they will invest the money in expanding businesses and create a trickle-down effect, which is a whole different kind of economics. So yeah, there are two different kinds of economics. Immigration, you could see that Mr. Walz said, yes, there has to be some regulation on illegal immigration, and That actually has been taking place, but hasn't voted on. There was actually a bill that was put forth, negotiated in a compromise version, which would have balanced the whole immigration reform and would have passed Congress. But President Trump was said by Mr. Walz that Trump actually instructed the Congress members to vote against it. And that became an issue as well. So immigration is there. There's so many issues right now, and those are the key issues that voters are waiting to hear from in detail. Most people made up their minds already, but maybe 5 or 6% of the voters are still undecided, and that's the audience that was being addressed tonight by both sides.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to ask you next. But what also stands out for me is that much of the reporting around just, I suppose, the temperature of this debate is that it was evenly tempered. You know, there was a fair amount of restraint. In fact, I think one of the publications is going a step further to say that at some stage it seemed that you know, at least when Walz was talking about his 17-year-old witnessing a gun shooting, it seems Vance actually looked compassionate and genuinely concerned about that. I wonder how you reckon all of that lands with those undecided voters.
I think it'll be favorable toward the undecided voter. They may say both these guys are willing to talk to each other. Let me look at them more carefully. And in this case, Vance will have some advantage on that particular response. It was a very measured response. It was a careful one that actually showed some compassion. But Walz also had himself doing the same thing with Vance. He said, you may be right on this, or you may be right on this issue. I agree with you on this. So they were trying to make it look like they can really discuss issues without getting angry or vitriolic with each other and go to the substance of the issue, the substance itself. And I think to some extent they accomplished it. But I do believe that the vice presidential candidate, Walz, should have probably been more stringent about some of the inaccuracies that Vance had put forth and to try to dig deeper in those issues. On the other hand, they're appealing to a middle-of-the-road, 5%, 6% audience that wanted to see a debate that was more amenable toward each other. So that's kind of what they delivered. And I do believe it'll fall on some people's ears in the right way. We don't know which segment will get what and who will get the 1 or 2% they need. It's such a close race. In the swing states, it's less than 1% difference in some cases. So any little change in opinion of any small segment of voters can make a big difference.
All right, Peter Mathews, as always, we appreciate your insights. Thanks very much indeed for staying up and speaking to us here in Johannesburg. Professor Peter Mathews is with Cypress College, live to us there from California. We really appreciate the time indeed.